Associate Professor of Political Science here at Wilson College. And Wilson is pleased to be hosting the debate between the three Republican primary candidates for the 9th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. So I'd like to introduce you to, on my left, we have Schooley, Bill Schuster in the middle, and I will be moderating the debate along with Alex Hayes, who is the managing editor of the Gettysburg Times, and Sean Hardy, who is the editor of the Waynesboro Record-Herald. And I just wanted to take a minute to go over some of the rules. Out of respect for the candidates and the other members of the audience, please turn your cell phones off or set them to silent. No cheering or clapping during the debate. Please hold your applause to the very end. And also, it's important that you, unless you're a member of the media, no personal audio or visual recording devices are permitted. No political signs or banners so please refrain from holding up signs and banners if you have them. The format of the debate was conceived by and agreed to by the representatives of the three campaigns, and each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to make an opening and closing statement. The candidate receiving the initial question will have 2 minutes to reply, and then the other two candidates will each have 1 minute to respond. A 1-minute rebuttal will also be permitted if a candidate is specifically mentioned by another candidate. And the order of all of those was determined by a drawing, as was the order of the podium placement. So, gentlemen, welcome again, and good evening. So I guess we can begin with the opening statements, and Mr. Halverson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Wilson College, for hosting this event. Thank you, the moderators, for doing your jobs tonight. Glad you're here. I'd also like to thank my wife, Paula, for your never-ending love and support. Voters have a clear choice next Tuesday, which is a rare opportunity in a party primary. The choice is between the same old Washington establishment with no change, the status quo, versus a proven leader of change. Here's what you have with our current representative. He's a John Boehner lieutenant. He's repeatedly supported the vehicle mileage tax. He voted to fund Obamacare 10 times. He voted to raise the debt ceiling 14 times. During his 13 years in Washington, we've lost jobs and population in the district. Only 8 of our 12 counties have lost population in 10 years. His donor list is a who's who of Washington lobbyists and special interests. Our representative's only plan for the future is to replace Obama and Harry Reid. On the other hand, I have a proven record of leadership and of being able to get things done in difficult circumstances. I have a 29-year military record. As a senior Coast Guard officer, I led the reorganization of the entire Coast Guard after 9/11. I'm a small business owner. I'm the only candidate here that's 100% pro-life. And I'm also a 100% advocate of the Second Amendment. I decided to run for Congress during the fiscal cliff when the Republican leaders caved into Obama. I realized it was time for new leadership in our Republican Party. When I'm elected, my priorities will be to replace Republican leadership with authentic conservative leaders, to repeal and replace Obamacare, to cap, balance, and grow, that is, cap the deficit, balance the budget, and grow the economy, create jobs and economic growth by cutting taxes, cutting regulations, and expanding energy production. If we want to change Washington, we cannot keep re-electing the same old Washington insiders. It's time for a change. It's time for new leadership. Now I appreciate your vote on May 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson. Mr. Schooley.
Well, first I'd like to thank everyone for having me here tonight. I feel very blessed to live in a country where a working class man can run for the United States Congress. Let me tell you why I'm running. I started this journey some years ago. I was on the ballot. I almost made the ballot in 2012, but I didn't. And I filed with the FEC right away in 2014. That makes me the original challenger, although there's rumors out there that I'm put in the race to keep our Congressman Bill Schuster in office. and I can assure you that's not the case. I have worked far too hard for this. Now, the reason I'm doing this, first and foremost, is for a spiritual and political conviction. I feel it's my personal responsibility as a father and as an American to make sure that I leave my children a country worthy to have at the end of the day. I come from a place, I was raised here in Franklin County. This is my home. Although I was born in Fulton County, I count both counties as my home. My family's been here since the colonial days. It's always been a part of our family culture to know that history. We know where our gravestones are. And I'm working for my great-great-great-great-grandparents as much as I'm working for my children and plan on working for the people of this district. I'm dead serious about what I'm doing. I'm not going to waver. I only have one thing to fear in this life, and that is my judgment. So I am the only man here tonight with actual local government experience. Now, for the last 12 years, I've been working on the local scene doing many things. Construction budgets, working with grants for utilities, and also for land development issues. I've been involved in working with over 24 agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Schooley.
Thank you.
Congressman Schuster.
Well, thank you very much, and thank Wilson College and our moderators for being here tonight, and thanks for some of my families here. Most importantly, my son, who just graduated from Penn State on Sunday, so I can tell you I'm very proud that he's here today. And again, all the folks in here, supporters and other family members, appreciate you coming out tonight. I appreciate my two opponents for coming out and having this important public policy debate, and also to thank them for their service to our U.S. military. All of us appreciate that greatly. But most importantly, to thank the people of the 9th Congressional District for having the faith in me to send me to Washington to fight for their conservative values. And I've done just that. I've had a proven conservative record in Congress, fighting to stop the largest tax increase in history, all the way consistently voting to reduce taxes, reduce our regulations on our businesses to create jobs. We need to have a growing economy. That's how we solve our problems in America. And I'm the only person up here who's run a small business and employed people here in central Pennsylvania, up to 40 people. So I know firsthand what it's like to do business in central Pennsylvania and what it's like to do business up against the federal government and the many, many regulations we face. I fought Obamacare every step of the way. And for somebody to say that I'm for Obamacare just doesn't know the facts. I voted against it at the beginning. I voted against it 50 times. And I'll continue to fight against Obamacare. I have fought to make sure that our military is strong and that our veterans are taken care of. We owe those veterans for their service to this country. I fought to allow us to develop our energy in this country, making sure Marcellus gas is coming out of the ground. We're fighting against the EPA and the Corps of Engineers every day to make sure the Obama administration doesn't, by pen, able to put a regulation in place to stop that. We need to develop our energy, and we started to do that. We started to see our manufacturing come back to our shores. Actions speak louder than words. I'm a proud conservative. I have endorsements from the NRA, the pro-life, and by the way, there's a Western Pennsylvania life organization that only Travis Schooley and I are in here on the voter guide. So I have a 100% voting record, NRA life, and most importantly, the endorsement from the people of the 9th Congressional District. Thank you so much, and I ask for your vote again.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. And the first question goes to Mr. Schuster.
Congressman Schuster, what is your alternative to the Affordable Care Act?
Well, for years now, we've been talking about reforming Medicare in this country, and we were shoved down the throats of the American people by a Democratic-controlled Congress and a Democratic president. And I fought against it all along, and I continue to fight against it. My solutions, and I put it out in writing, and I propose things to make sure that first and foremost we don't get between the patient and the doctor. They're the ones that should be making that decision. Allow for choice in health care. Allow for health insurance. When you have choice, you create competition, and competition drives down the cost. Doing things like allowing, like we do with our life insurance and car insurance, buy across state lines. Let people pool together, let small businesses pool together to be able to have choices out there. Again, when you have choice, you drive down the cost of any product, including health care. Also, to make sure we have tort reform. Our doctors today perform procedures and tests that they don't need to do, but they do it because they're afraid they're going to be sued. That would significantly reduce the cost of health care in this country. Allowing the states to have more flexibility. The states administer Medicaid. Allowing the states to administer those programs to let them drive down the cost, let them do what's best for their state, not have a one-size-fit-all policy coming out of Washington, D.C. Those are a few of them. And finally, encouraging personal responsibility, making sure people know to take care of their health. When they're healthier, it drives down the cost of health care. So it's all about not big government solutions, it's about reducing it down and letting people have the ability to take their health care with them, to have personal responsibility, to let them have choice. When people have choice, it drives down the cost. We can see that in all the products in our economy today. When people can go out and comparison shop who's got the best deal, who's got the best service, they're going to pick that provider that does the best. So that has to be essential to reforming the healthcare system in this country, the healthcare insurance system in this country.
Mr. Halverson, a 1-minute response.
Sure. Obamacare must be eliminated. We must defund it, we must repeal it, and we must replace it. One of the travesties, and one of the reasons I'm running, is our Republican leadership in the House has failed to offer an alternative to Obamacare. They'll vote against it 50 times, they won't vote once for an alternative. That's a problem. That's a lack of leadership. That's a lack of a strategy that would work. We could do it, but they won't do it. So that's why we need new leaders. The plan that I have published has 4 components: freedom, fairness, competition, and compassion. And 1 minute is not very long to answer this question. So we could fill in the dots. Many of them Mr. Schuster has already articulated. I would have to ask why our Republican leadership has failed to offer an alternative. I would agree with many of those components. We Republicans have an alternative. We simply have failed in our leadership in the House to propose anything and even vote on it.
Thank you. Mr. Scalia, 1-minute response, please.
I have 3 reasons why Obamacare shouldn't be good for America. One is a Ronald Reagan quote. One of the traditional methods of imposing statism or socialism on the people has been by way of medicine. It gives the government far too much power to know our health records and ultimately maybe even be able to control our health through our medicines and our vitamins. So 3, we need to have a plan that actually honors the socio-political heritage of our nation. That is the free market system. And many Republicans have ideas. I have ideas as well. We need to reward individuals for shopping for health care. We need to get the government out of it. The problem is we have too much bipartisanship here that doesn't allow for us to get these things through. There is a mystery as to how Obamacare was even implemented, which I won't have time to talk about. I don't know if you all know that. So I think that employers...
Thank you, Mr. Scalia. The second question goes to Mr. Halverson.
Mr. Halverson, what are your views on universal background checks for gun sales?
We have existing laws that I believe are adequate for covering background checks for gun sales. The problem with this issue of gun control is that it protects the criminal, and the laws actually suppress legal ownership. Not to say that occasionally criminals are caught through these background checks, and so I do support a level that is currently in existence. But if the suggestion is that we need to increase gun control, increase background checks, I'm against that. I'm satisfied with the level of background checks that are currently undertaken in our country.
Mr. Schooley?
I say it like this: so goes the second, goes the rest. If we don't have the Second Amendment, we lose the teeth to protect any of the other Bill of Rights. We must keep it. Background checks. No matter what we do, we're not going to be able to stop the wrong people from getting guns. Whether they take them from their neighbors' houses, or whether they go through some loophole, or whether they, I don't know, find them somewhere. But we're not going to be able to stop people from getting guns. There's way too many guns. We have over 300,000 guns in this country, and I think for a people with that many guns, we have a very low crime rate. I am absolute staunch in defending the Second Amendment rights, because we would not be free today if we did not have Second Amendment rights. I'll end it.
Congressman Schuster?
Well, I oppose universal background checks, and my record in Congress has been very clear. I have a 100% voting record with the NRA. I believe the Second Amendment is something that, as Mr. Schooley said, is something we have to defend, and I've done that in Congress, demonstrated time and time again. There are enough laws on the books today. Look at Chicago, for instance. Has the most gun laws on the books. It's one of the highest murder rates in the country. We need to put laws in place that allow our healthcare professionals and our education professionals to be able to talk to law enforcement, so that when we have a situation that occurs in Colorado or in Connecticut and other places, healthcare professionals and our frontline education people, they know these folks, and they need to be able to talk. The law prohibits them now from talking. So we have to remove that barrier so that we can have these folks talk, because a bad person with a gun can only be stopped by a good person with a gun, and we've seen that time and time again.
Thank you, Congressman Schuster. Mr. Schooley, the next question goes to you. And since the debate is taking place at a higher education institution, my question is in that spirit. So the rising cost of college, as you know, is a problem for many students and their families. So I was wondering, what do you think should be the role of the federal government in higher education policy? You have 2 minutes.
Well, personally, I don't think there is a constitutional mandate for education, although there is definitely a benefit to having people be highly educated. As far as the rising cost of college tuition is concerned, when I went to college at Chambersburg University here local, and that was in the 90s, it was $3,000 to $4,000 a semester. I don't know what it is today, but I imagine it's much higher. So we have we have a couple things going on here. We have low rates of borrowing money that are enticing people in. And we have programs probably that get people into college that are having trouble and are failing at it. But there's a money-making incentive with higher education, and it's true. So if they spend the money and they fail out, they still spend the money. And the pay rates for people at the higher echelons are disproportionate. And altogether, these things are increasing the cost of education. So we really have to think about how we're doing this. College education probably isn't meant for everybody. It's nice to think so, but we do need people out there doing technical skills and also working in the labor sectors and so forth.
Mr. Schuster, you have a 1 minute response.
Thank you. The cost of tuition rising is a serious problem in this country, and I believe it's because of easy money. The federal government and some of the states make it too easy to get money for these universities, and so the costs continue to escalate. I'm not talking so much about the private universities like Wilson, but the public universities. Now, my daughter graduated from Penn State a couple of years ago, and her tuition went up. Well, inflation was 1.5% to 2% every year. Her tuition went up 5% to 6% every year. Now, there's something wrong with that. We got to make sure that these Pell Grants, which have tripled under Obama, that we don't make it as easy for these universities to do it. We certainly want kids to be able to afford to go to college and get low-cost loans on interest and things like that. But it comes to personal responsibility. It comes to also, as Mr. Schooley said, there are some kids that maybe don't need to go to a 4-year university. Maybe go to places like Wyotech, or the folks you're producing here in Franklin County out of the Votech school. Welders and technicians and plumbers. Those are key jobs in the economy, and they're great paying jobs in this economy.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson. 1 minute.
I oppose federal intervention in higher education as well as in lower education. I believe that there's no constitutional justification for it. I believe that the college loan and college tuition loans are distorting the market, they're driving costs up. I believe that the grants that are coming in the millions and millions of dollars from the federal government, many of them are very suspicious in the sense that what they're incentivizing people to study are unnecessary, and it's crony capitalism, it's crony education, if you will. So I don't think there's a federal role in higher education.
Thank you. Okay, Congressman Schuster, you have the next question. 2 minutes.
Partisanship has caused gridlock on Capitol Hill. What can lawmakers from both sides of the political aisle do to create a more productive government?
Well, I think it starts at the top. You've got to have leaders of both parties being willing to sit down at the table. We haven't seen that from President Obama and Harry Reid. They truly are the problems in Washington. And the number of bills we've sent over there and have died in what's now becoming the graveyard for legislation is the United States Senate. But I think what I've demonstrated in my short term as chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee is we passed a bill in the House, Water Resources Reform and Development Act. We passed it with 417 members, the conservatives, myself on one side, the Democrats and the liberals. We came together. We produced a bill for the first time in a word of bill's history that was fiscally responsible. We are going to deauthorize as much as we authorize in the word of bill. The second thing is it's reform driven. We actually added an R, Water Resources and Development Act, or what it used to be called. It's Water Resources and Reform Act. And I worked across the aisle with my members on both sides of the aisle to come up with these reforms that Americans are crying for so that our courts, our inland waterway system, our flood control in this country is able to move forward so we're not stymied with all these rules and regulations. And finally what I did, which is absolutely critical to me, and became a very big sticking point with the U.S. Senate, is I said I'm not going to give up an inch of the House and the Congress's constitutional authority to the executive branch. And we've seen that go on far too long. That's why you can see a president with the stroke of a pen. It's because Congress gave him some of that authority. Some of it, I believe, is violating the Constitution. But I was able to bring together 417 people. I had 3 people vote against me. So I believe it can be done. It takes leadership to bring people to the table. And the legislative body is not someplace you walk in and say, hey, you're going to vote for this. You've got to sit down with 535 free agents, sit them at a table, work through the process, and you can produce positive legislation. And I'm going to say that next week we're going to pass for it in the House and the Senate, and it's going to go to the President's desk. And I'm very, very proud of the leadership I provided to see that move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson. 1 minute.
Bipartisanship certainly is possible, but what we're seeing practiced is a lot of give and take. That's the Republicans give and the Democrats take. It's easy for bipartisanship when you're willing to spend money. It's when you have to apply some fiscal responsibility that you find the other side, the left, less willing to participate. That being said, I think there are some issues that both sides have some possible agreement. Energy is one of those. We have Democratic members from southern states who are being penalized, as are the rest of the country, by the lack of the president approving Keystone Pipeline. Ms. Landrieu, Senator Landrieu, for example. One example where there could be outlined some issues like energy where we could find agreement on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. Mr. Schooley, 1 minute.
Yes, partisanship is a problem to getting bills, getting laws made. Depends on how you look at it, but you know, it depends on how we look at ourselves here as Americans. We have to ask ourselves, is bigger government better government? Partisanship leading to more rules, laws, regulations is not necessarily a good thing. We're already being choked by the number of laws we have and regulations out there. I've worked in land development. I've had to read literally thousands of pages to comply before a shovel was moved on projects. There was a day when we built the Empire State Building in 14 months from mental thought all the way to the finished product. Today it takes that long to do a pre-engineered concrete box culvert over a waterway that has no water. So we need to think about this in terms of, do we want to be free and independent people, or do we want the government to take care of us from cradle to grave? And that doesn't necessarily need more laws.
Thank you. Mr. Halverson, the next question goes to you. You have 2 minutes.
Mr. Halverson, can you please explain your views on the current level of military spending in the federal government?
Well, the military is the backbone of and defines the strength of our country. Unfortunately, what's happening is that the greatest national security risk to our country is our fiscal situation. The national debt approaching $18 trillion is weakening our country. It's creating a devaluation of the dollar. That's causing energy prices to go up. It's an impact that is far-reaching. And its impact on the military is leading us to the point where we had our own Secretary of Defense approximately 3 weeks ago declare that he was going to cut our troop strength to pre-World War II levels because the funding to support the existing troop strength apparently was supposedly not there. We spent it on all these other programs, and there's nothing left to support the military, which, as I said, is a cornerstone for the strength of the country. Well, his announcement, poorly timed, led 5 days later to Mr. Putin declaring occupation of Crimea. So there's a ripple effect when we have a $17 trillion, $18 trillion debt in our country, creating our military to no longer be able to sustain itself, leading to instability throughout the world. brings us back to where we need to talk about, which is the problem we have with overspending and debt in our country. For 13 years now, we've had a representative in Congress who has been enabling that debt to increase to the tune of over about $11.5 trillion that must be stopped. We need to put fiscally responsible conservatives in Congress, and particularly from the 9th Congressional District.
Mr. Schooley, 1 minute.
I was in the United States Army's intelligence analyst, ELINT analyst, electronic intelligence warfare, also cross-trained in battlefield analysis, working on national level and theater level priorities. Our military is the weakest it's been since the days of Jimmy Carter. There is a danger in that. I believe in a strong military, and especially so when it's for defense. Now, it's also true that we have 800 to 1,000 bases around the world at great expense, which wouldn't bother us as much as if we weren't in a spending crisis that Mr. Halverson has pointed out. We have $17 trillion debt right now. That's $150,000 per taxpayer. We have $129 trillion in unfunded federal liabilities, and that's $1.1 million per taxpayer. We're going to have to think about how we're spending our money. You at home can't spend your money beyond your means for too long, and government can't either.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Schooley.
Aye.
Oh, yes, you have a 1 minute response. I'm sorry.
The number one responsibility in the Constitution of the federal government is to defend this nation, is our U.S. military. And that's why I serve on the Armed Services Committee. I got on that committee because it is the number one responsibility. And as we pointed out, the biggest threat to our U.S. today is our debt. We have got to be working on reducing that debt, and it is a Republican-controlled House. We have cut spending 4 years in a row. That hasn't happened since the Korean War. So we are getting things done. Once again, the blame is put on Republicans when it should be looked over to the United States Senate, where bills go to die. Now, as far as our defense of this country, you've seen around the world the situation with Russia and Ukraine. The situation would happen in Benghazi, Iran. The Chinese every day are pushing out. They don't have respect for the United States of America. We have to make sure we have the strongest military in the world to be able to protect our interests, to be able to protect ourselves and our friends and allies around the world, or we're going to see what happened in Russia continue to happen in Southeast Asia.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Schooley, the next question goes to you. So there was a good deal of debate surrounding the most recent Farm Bill, which was passed in February of this year. I was wondering if you could please state your position on the Farm Bill, particularly commenting on the place of food stamps within that legislation.
Again, one of the troubling things in our country right now at this point in time is we have an awful lot of people who need an awful lot of help. And really, what it comes down to is jobs and work ethic. Now, when it comes to jobs, if we had more jobs and we had better work ethic, and we didn't have these programs lying in wait as safety nets, as long as those safety net programs are there, charities and faith-based groups are not going to pick up the load. It's the same thing as if you're a kid living at home and your mother's doing the dishes for you, and guess what you don't do, the dishes. But the minute she stops doing the dishes and they pile up and they start to smell, you do them because it needs done. So right now, we don't have groups out there doing what they could be doing because the government's doing it already. And they're not doing it as well as could be done by other people. So we need to really work on getting this economy back on track and getting more meaningful jobs. There's a lot of things in the way. And how much time do I have left? 1 minute? Okay, great. Yes. That 1 minute was hard. So, the thing that keeps these welfare programs running, we also need to stamp out corruption. There's no doubt about that. But we need the taxes lower. Lower taxes benefits everybody. It benefits individuals, it benefits businesses. And as long as we have tax rates where we do, then we're going to small up the private sector. And we have also other things. We have regulations that are too encompassing, and those regulations are squeezing the private sector to death. Also in the jobs market, we have the free trade agreements. Now I know I've talked about that. I won't have time to talk about it, but everybody knows our jobs are going overseas. We've trained them, we've sent our equipment overseas, and we've lost jobs because of it.
Thank you, Congressman Schuster, 1 minute.
Well, I think everybody in this room, anywhere in Franklin County being the largest ag county in the state, and the 9th Congressional District being the largest ag district in the state, we all know it's not really a farm bill, it's a food stamp bill. That's why I voted against my leadership when the farm bill first came to say, no, we've got to break these apart. And that's just what we did. We went into the conference, we came back with a farm bill. It wasn't perfect, but I know how important it is to the farmers back home here. But there was significant reforms that our farmers are calling for. It's in that bill. There's $23 billion in mandatory spending cuts. That's the first time that's ever happened. Mandatory spending cuts are real cuts that will affect the bottom line. It's not enough, but we did it. And I'll continue to fight for the farmers here. But once again, it's not really a farm bill, but we've got to make sure that our agriculture is strong. It's a national security interest for us to make sure our nation can not only feed itself, but we can feed people around the world. And we have the most productive agricultural sector in the world. We need to make sure we're reducing the burdens of the federal government on our farmers to let them go out and grow their crops and compete in the world and help move this economy forward.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson, 1 minute.
Let me start by correcting something that was just said. While it's half right that our representative voted to separate food stamps from the farm bill, he also voted to include the farm stamps for the farm bill in the same 15-minute vote, just as a matter of record. I oppose inclusion of food stamps in the farm bill. They are well, it was a ploy. It was a scheme to bring farm state senators on board early on to include support for poverty programs through farm food stamps. And it needs to be kept separate. I was fighting to keep it separate last fall, and it was a wishy-washy handling of that. And we thought we had a big win, and then it turned around this year, and it was voted to be included again in the farm bill, which our representative supported.
Would you like a 1 minute?
Absolutely, absolutely. I did support it when it came back, because it's important to farmers. There were reforms in there, there were cuts of spending. But you know, I'm not the one who pounds on the table and says subsidies are bad, and then has my hand out to receive subsidies on my farm. In addition to that, not that he received subsidies on this farm that he stated in a public forum, his land values have tripled because of ethanol. And those are directly based on subsidies. Look, farmers, I know farmers and I know they're taking these subsidies. I'm not criticizing farmers for taking subsidies. I'm criticizing for hypocrisy. If you're going to say you're against subsidies, you shouldn't have your hand out for them. And that's the point I make. This farm bill, again, it moved in the right direction. It didn't move far enough, and we'll continue to fight it. That's why I originally voted against my leadership to separate the two of them. And then it went to the Senate. And as Mr. Halverson even pointed out there, he was talking about Mary Landrieu. Harry Reid kills things for Mary Landrieu, too. He's not doing any good for anybody.
Thank you. I'm going to permit a 1 minute rebuttal for Mr. Halverson on this question.
Thank you very much. I don't think the rebuttal was intended so we could attack and take cheap shots, and that's what just was taken. Mr. Schuster voted for this farm bill that included these subsidies for ethanol. To set the record straight, I received $0 from farm bills in spite of the advertisements, deceptive advertisements that claim that I received $500,000 for a 36-tillable acre farm in Iowa. $500,000, really?
How much
Check.org, I received $0, sir.
How much did the farmer receive?
Fact.org made that clear. Land values obviously increasing as the reason. I'm not a hypocrite. I'm speaking tough love because, in fact, and the audience I'm sure will maintain order, that farm values went up. I owned land, so it went up as a direct result of the farm subsidies, which I am railing against. That's not hypocrisy, that's leadership.
Thank you. The next question goes to Congressman Schuster.
What are your priorities for federal funding projects in Franklin County?
Well, my priority is to make sure we control federal spending, reduce the amount of federal spending. And once we get on a path to a balanced budget, and my opponents up here tonight have said they've been in support of a 4-year balanced budget, a 5-year balanced budget, a 7-year balanced budget. I'm not sure what their position or their plan is, but mine has been consistent. It's about, I've said 10 years we can get to a balanced budget without hurting our seniors, without hurting some of the core programs that are important to people in this nation. We can do it, but we have to be fiscally responsible. We've got to be tough, make tough decisions. That's why a 10-year balanced budget approach cuts $5.1 trillion from the federal budget. That's a big number. You made some tough decisions doing that. And one of the toughest decisions you have to make is getting at entitlements. If we don't get at entitlements, and that's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the service on our debt makes up about 2/3 of the federal budget. In the next 20 years, if we don't get it under control, it'll consume 100%. We won't have money left for anything. So to talk about what spending priorities right now, that's not the point here. It's about what we're going to cut, how we're going to cut this budget in a responsible way to make sure we get this economy back on track. And as I said, Social Security, Medicare, we've got to make sure we reform them. Because I have my 22-year-old son sitting, my niece is sitting here tonight. It's not going to be there for them if we don't make those decisions now. And I've advocated since I first went to Washington about getting into entitlements and Medicare reform. If we don't do it, it continues to grow and it continues to consume our budget. And you have to make tough decisions. But the one guiding force for me is I am not going to cut seniors that are retired today, their Social Security checks, or their Medicare. We've made a deal with them. We have a contract with them. We've got to do it looking out to future generations and reform this system in a way that it'll be here for my son and my niece who are here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson. 1 minute.
We have a spending problem in this country, and those spending bills originate in the House. And for 13 years, we've been represented by somebody in the House who has gone along with those spending bills. I appreciate what was just said. I appreciate the discipline that was articulated. However, the discipline in practice is simply not evident. $11.5 trillion of debt during those 13 years. $18 trillion in debt. That's just on budget. Off budget, you've got $2 trillion with the Fed. You've got Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac doing their own thing off budget. Debt, debt, debt. Debt is overtaking us. Debt is crushing us. And it's government spending that's doing that. We don't have discretionary money to be sending federal projects out into the various districts. We banned pork, and that was a great victory for the country a couple of years ago. To the extent that that's been maintained, we need to continue to do so. I'll give Mr. Boehner credit for that.
Mr. Schooley, 1 minute.
Well, I'd like to say one thing. I've been working here in Franklin County already. Chambersburg Hospital expansion project, I was one of the people behind the scenes making that happen. The Chambersburg area school district, all of the elementary schools have been updated. I was one of the people in the background working to make that happen. When we also looked at Keystone Health, this new facility out there on 5th Avenue, I was one of the people working behind the scenes to make that happen. They were all American Recovery and Reinvestment Act grants, and I was buried in paperwork to get these projects moving. I'd like to also say that I will be working to make sure that Letterkenny is a major source for employment in this area, Franklin County, as it relates to our military and our defense. And overall, when you look at this as a national scale, we really need to get this economy back on track. And that means more jobs. We need to honor our commitments to our seniors, and we need to protect our farmers, and that's our dairy farmers as well.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe Mr. Halverson, you are up next, and the next question, we have a 2-minute response.
Mr. Halverson, can you share your thoughts on current proposals to increase the federal minimum wage?
Happy to. The federal minimum wage is, in my view, unnecessary, but given that it's in place, we got to work with it. Increasing it is a bad idea. I oppose it from the get-go. What it will simply do is punish those who would be intended to be benefited by it. It will backfire. It will create a higher cost for employers. It will reduce employment, not increase employment. I have talked about consideration of an apprentice wage. That's not a new government program. That's just flexibility within the wage laws that would allow employers, because they would be hiring people into trades and technical capability, they'd be training them, they'd be investing in these individuals, developing a long-term relationship. They would have flexibility in the hiring and the cost of their labor up front. That's what I mean by an apprentice wage. Many clean manufacturing facilities in our district would benefit by being able to bring people in at the lower wage levels, at below minimum wage, invest in them in training, and grow a long-term employee. We need ideas like that that would help generate employment for people. The minimum wage was never intended to be a sustainable wage. It was intended to be an entry wage, but as it continues to go up and as we are now proposing to raise it even further, it's simply going to backfire. It's going to create more unemployment.
Thank you. Mr. Schooley, 1 minute.
I'm not in favor of raising the minimum wage. It represents a pay loss for everyone else, period. When they make more, the cost goes up for goods and services. The cost goes up for everybody across the board, but the pay for people making more does not go up, not right away at least. You know, you have to ask yourself, the same people making those sandwiches, if they're getting a little more money, they're going to buy a sandwich themselves. Before long, that sandwich is going to cost them more. So who wins out of this? It's an inflationary creation measure. In the end, you have more money chasing after the same amount of goods. My competitor's plan here for a apprenticeship wage, I disagree because we already have structures to reward technical and specialized labor. Examples, engineers and training. Who manages this? The pay rates, if we're going to be setting pay rates for specialists or people with technical capabilities. That's government driven. I disagree with it. We already have incentive for workers to advance their education and in pursuit of licensing professionals.
Thank you. Congressman Schuster.
I oppose raising the minimum wage. It's a job killer. It's for young people starting in the workforce. It'll hurt them. It'll hurt high school and college kids being able to go working at restaurants and other facilities that can pay them a lower wage. It's been estimated it'll raise the wages for 500,000 people, but it'll kill 1 million jobs along the way. So it's a loss. And as a small business owner, I know firsthand how important it is to make sure you get good, qualified people, and you move them through the process, move them up the wage scale. And I did that. I saw it firsthand as an employer of 40 people and many young people over the years. And quality young people, I never paid them a minimum wage. I made sure they got nice increases to keep them motivated in the job. And finally, an apprentice wage, that is a government program. It's a new government program, and it was proposed by none other than Barack Obama. He's proposed that. So I don't know where we're getting off saying that proposing this new level of wage is not a new federal program. And as Mr. Schooley points out, who's going to enforce it? The federal government? It'll be another disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Schooley. The next question goes to you, and you will have 2 minutes. As a congressman, what would you do to ensure that the GOP sheds its reputation as the quote-unquote party of no?
Well, since I don't have notes on this topic, it's one that I didn't foresee. I don't see myself as being a person to necessarily say that I'm going to change that party from being a party of no. There are absolutely things we need to say no to. So I won't make a commitment to work across the fence on everything. They say there's an 80-20 rule. And people have asked me, they said, are you supportive of that idea? Well, I told them, I said, it depends on what the 80% is, and it depends on the 20%. So when it comes to something like gun rights, no, I'm not giving, because we would not be free without it. And my children are not going to live in bondage. I determined that I'm going to be a person that stands in the way of that ever happening. That's the number one thing I can do for my children. So the preconceived idea there that it's the party of no, I don't see it that way. 1 and 2, no promises.
Thank you, Congressman Schuster. 1 minute.
Well, first of all, we're not the party of no. We're portrayed that by the liberal media in this country. ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, and MSN, all the other small little alphabet soups, they're out there constantly pounding on the Republican Party. It's hard for us to get our message through because of that. We don't control the media. We shouldn't control the media. But the Republican Party in the House, in the last 3.5 years, we've passed over 100 bills dealing with reforming taxes, reducing regulations, promoting our own homegrown energy, getting out there our oil and our gas and our coal, stopping Obamacare. We voted on that numerous times. The Republican Party is moving forward with ideas. It's the U.S. Senate that it goes and those policies die. Harry Reid says no, and we've got to make a change this November to get a Republican Senate so we can put bills on the president's desk and make him put up or shut up.
Mr. Halverson, 1 minute.
We've got to stop blaming Harry Reid for everything. We need to be the party of no when it comes to taxes, spending, and borrowing. And the Republican Party has lost that badge of honor of saying no to taxes, spending, and borrowing. We have an $18 trillion debt and it's climbing. Unless we say no, who will say no? It will keep going up. Problem is we're not saying no, so it keeps going up. With that in mind, targeting Obamacare. As I mentioned earlier, we need an alternative to Obamacare. We are saying no to Obamacare ostensibly 50 times in symbolic votes without any serious proposal or alternative being put forward to get behind, to be able to say yes to. That's where we need to go. We need to say no to the wrong things, and we say yes to the right things, and we need leadership to know the difference.
Okay, and I think, just so that, in the interest of fairness, so that everybody has time to field the first question once, we'll do one more round of questions, one from each of the moderators, and then move into closing statements, if that's acceptable. Okay, the next question is for Mr. Schuster.
Do you favor the legalization of medical marijuana?
No, I don't. I think it's a gateway drug. It's going to cause more problems than it'll solve. I just think it's wrong-headed. I'm a little bit surprised that that's a question here in this forum. Really, the states are dealing with that themselves. At the federal level, there are going to be, for instance, in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, deal with all the railroads and the trucking companies across America. And there's a real serious problem about people being out there in Colorado smoking marijuana and then getting behind in an engine, behind a train or a truck. And so it's a very big problem for those folks that do interstate commerce. No, I think it's wrong-headed. It's just something that, again, I'm a little surprised it came up in a debate like that. Hopefully the final question would be about maybe Letterkenny and how we have a secretary of the Army and a chief of staff of the Army saying we're going to do another round of BRAC. When that happened in our hearing room, I immediately left and I came back and started to talk to the folks here back home about Letterkenny and how we're going to face another BRAC round. How I'm getting the community together like we did in 2005, and we've got to make sure, make no mistake about it, BRAC is going to be a political process. But we here in Franklin County and Letterkenny have to make sure we're making the economic argument like we did in 2005. We had the most efficient depot in the country. And that's why we survived. Because I can tell you, there's two powerful senators sitting down in Alabama, and the mothership for Letterkenny is down in Huntsville. Senator Shelby and Senator Sessions sit on the Armed Services Committee and on the Appropriations Committee. And they're going to do everything in their power to take Letterkenny's work and take it to Alabama. And I'm not going to sit up here and stand for that. That's why we've already started the process, bringing the workers together, the management together, the community together, just like we did in 2005. And I commit to you, we're going to wage the same kind of war if there's another round of BRAC as we did in 2005.
Mr. Halverson, you're welcome to comment on marijuana or Letterkenny.
I appreciate permission because I was going to. I'll start with Letterkenny. There's no BRAC in our future in the near term. 2017 is the earliest. You can bet neither party is going to support BRAC before the next presidential election. That's not to say that Letterkenny needs to slack off. They need to be the best. They're a national asset. They need to be the best. They need to be rewarded and continue to be funded based on their performance. But I reject the notion of fear-mongering somehow that we've got BRAC in our future. It's not happening. Marijuana is a gateway drug, in my opinion, and it is a state's issue, and I think that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Schooley.
Listen carefully. Marijuana is a gateway drug. However, the Governor Court recently approved medical marijuana for the use in children with seizures. I know a man who treats these children, and that works better. The PA State Nurses Association, representing more than 212,000 registered nurses, supported the move by Corbett, and 80% of Pennsylvanians agreed. I support medical marijuana usage as prescribed by doctors and administered by healthcare professionals. And what I'm talking about specifically is CBD, cannabis oil. It's an oil derivative. It's effective medically. There is no narcotic in it whatsoever. There's no gateway drug possibility with the use of this as a medical tool. So for that, yes, I think we can have some medical trials to see if this will work. Recreational drug use is bad. In my opinion, smoking pot makes you dumb and lazy. And it's a gateway drug.
Thank you. Mr. Halverson, you have the next question. 2 minutes.
A law concerning immigration has not yet been passed. What do you think are the key issues that need to be resolved?
The rule of law,
Could you please repeat the question?
A law concerning immigration has not yet been passed. What do you think are the key issues that need to be resolved?
the key issues are rule of law and compassion. The rule of law is at stake. As long as we allow 11 to 12 million illegal immigrants to reside in our country without any justice being applied, we're overlooking it and we're sacrificing the rule of law, the cornerstone of our republic and of our free nation. We have to enforce the laws, and that's not being done. My policy is to secure the border and enforce existing laws. We need the willpower to do that. We need to reject endorsements by people like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce who are pushing for amnesty. Amnesty is not an option. It has to be rejected. The compassion side of it. We have people here who are here and have been here for a long time, but they are violating our laws. We need to develop, and I'm going to put something out here that's risky because it is not to be misinterpreted as an amnesty. We need to identify people who are here illegally, and they need to be brought into the legal system through self-identification and through identification by law enforcement and employers, and they need to be put into a legal work visa status. They need to pay the penalty for their illegality. And if they truly are acting in good faith and they truly want to be citizens, then they need to find a way to get themselves back home after they've identified themselves, after they've come into a legal work visa situation, paying a fine for their illegality and get in line. And if they want to apply for citizenship, they can get in at the back of the line.
Thank you. Mr. Schooley, you have 1 minute.
One, border security. It's a national security threat. I was an intelligence analyst. I know people. We're letting everybody through that border. Everybody through that border. People who are dangerous, and then we're watching them. It's like you and I know we have 3 burglars in our front yard and we let our door open, and then we go to bed. And then we wonder if they're going to come in and take our television. So, border security is first. 2, we have to follow the law. I'm not for streamlining amnesty. Illegal is illegal. We have to improve the function of government in every agency, and this is no different. To process people in who want to become Americans, but we should be screening people. Do they have diseases that we can't control as a threat to public safety? Are they terrorists? Do they have criminal records? These are things we need to look at before we let people into our country. It makes sense to me. It's common sense. And there's ag worker programs that get talked about quite often. They try and couple the two together. We can use them as separate topics.
Thank you. Congressman Schuster, 1 minute.
Thank you. I've been very clear on my position on illegal immigration and starting with no amnesty. That's the wrong way to go about it. And all we have to do is look back to, look, I love Ronald Reagan, but he was duped in the 1980s. They said, give these 2.8 million people amnesty, secure the border, enforce the laws. Well, we gave them the 2.8 amnesty, but we didn't secure our border and we didn't enforce the laws. So what do we have today? We have 13 to 14 million undocumented workers. So we've got to do those 3 things first. Second, here in Franklin County, anybody that's from around here knows that people picking the apples, the peaches, milking the cows, they're immigrant workers, many of them. They've immigrated here. We need to start with having immigrant workers. Let me be very clear. Some people misconstrue what I say. Immigrant workers need an ID card, a biometric ID card, to make it easy for the farmers and the local business people to determine if they're here illegally or not. That's one thing we should start with. And again, ag workers here in Franklin County, it's extremely important, and I'm very sympathetic to figuring out how we get a guest worker program for those people.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Schooley, the final question goes to you. As the parent of young children, I'm sure you're concerned about the state of primary and secondary education. So I'm wondering, where do you stand on the Common Core standards and curriculum?
Well, not only am I a parent, which I take very seriously, I'm also an American, and I am pretty disturbed by some of the things I've seen online. Now, to be fair, I don't know if everything I've seen online is true, but there's things I've seen about how children do math today that is not the way I learned how to do math, and is infinitely more complicated. And stupid is the word that comes to mind. I'm also concerned about Common Core as far as educating the heritage of this nation away. I've heard that in places they don't educate before Abraham Lincoln, a distant cousin of mine, by the way. But that's a big concern, because if we educate our heritage away, we don't know who we are as a people. We don't know where we are today, and we won't know where we're going tomorrow. It's pretty simple. We need to understand these things. Now, strictly speaking, there's no federal mandate for education at all. America was a great place when we had one-room schoolhouses. In many ways, they taught our children were taught more about living life. And I think that's one of the things we can't leave behind. Now, I'd also point out, since I am against government-mandated education, Mr. Schuster's been playing both sides of the fence here. He says he's for constitutional education, but not too long ago he did vote for No Child Left Behind. I hope you're canceling that. And if we didn't have that, there would be no possibility of Common Core today. We wouldn't be talking about this. Additionally, I haven't found very many teachers that are in support of that, and we're teaching to a test now instead of teaching for subject matter. And I think that if we're not careful, the environment of learning could be compromised. But I do look forward to hearing from more teachers on this. Some people on the street say no child left behind is no child out ahead, and one size fits all is not.
Congressman Schuster?
I oppose Common Core. I think the federal government has no business putting out there, telling states how to run their educational systems. It should be left to the states. It should be left to the locals. And I've said that consistently throughout my time in Congress. So I'm against that. And I'm very close to education. My sister teaches in the Altoona school system, elementary ed. My daughter's an elementary ed teacher in Northern Virginia. And I hear firsthand the trials and tribulations, the difficulty of these federal regulations that makes it so difficult for them to teach their kids. The other thing, my daughter teaches in a school where it's a heavily Hispanic population. And her greatest frustration is that these parents aren't trying to learn English. And so she has to go through the process in a parent-teacher conference with an interpreter and everyone. So it's very frustrating. So I believe that English should be the national language in this country, and it should be done by law. And I think that if you look throughout history, when immigrants come to this country and they assimilate and they learn the English language, they succeed. And that's really important, I think, for those folks coming to this shore.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson.
I oppose Common Core. As many of you know, the Common Core was funded with $50 billion from the stimulus project. It's more big government, and there is no federal role for the federal government in education. I believe it's a local issue, and it's typical of what happens in Washington when they have mandates. They pass them down, they send a little bit of money to sort of bribe folks to take the bait, and then they do, and then they pull the money back or they reduce it, and local bodies are stuck with the bill. I too have my youngest daughter is a school teacher. She got so fed up with the rules, even though she registered as a teacher in Virginia, having gone to a Virginia college, chose to teach in Honduras as a missionary rather than enter the public school system. That's how badly she felt about how things are going in our public schools.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into closing statements now. And Congressman Schuster, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you again. Thank you, Wilson College, and thank you, our moderators, and thank all of you for coming out tonight, and thanks to both these gentlemen for participating in this important public forum. I think if you look at my record, it's clear I'm a conservative. I've gone to Washington, I fight hard to cut taxes, I voted against the largest tax increase in history to make sure that the 99.9% of the people back here at home didn't get a tax raise. I'm voting and working hard on balancing the budget, making sure we're doing hard cuts, reforming programs like Social Security and Medicare. We have to do it, or our children and our grandchildren are going to be strapped with this debt that's going to crush them. I don't want to be the first generation to leave this country better or worse off than we got it, and that's where we're headed. We've got to make these tough decisions. As I said before, I'm against Obamacare. Don't let anybody confuse you. I'm against Obamacare, have been from the beginning. I'll continue to fight it because it's bad for America. And just saying no is not the way to do it. You have to offer solutions. And I've offered solutions, whether it's health care, whether it's energy, whether it's the Water Resources and Development Act that I put the leadership for, and we're going to pass next week on a big bipartisan basis, a fiscally responsible bill, a bill with reform in it, and a bill that doesn't give the executive branch another inch of the Congress's constitutional authority. I'm proud of the work I've done in Washington, voting to strengthen our military and protect our veterans. and I'm proud to say that I'm not fear-mongering when it comes to BRAC. Some of us aren't from this area. We've been through BRAC in '90. We've been through BRAC in the 2000s. We've got to be prepared. When the Secretary of the Army and the Chairman or the Chief of Staff of the Army say there should be BRAC, don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. The Senate will end up slipping it in there just like they did the last time, and we'll be fighting BRAC. And I want to be prepared here in Franklin County to make that economic argument just as we did in 2005, to make sure we're the most efficient depot in the system, so that you have private companies that are coming to Letterkenny today that want to do work with Letterkenny because of the efficiency we have there. It's an important economic generator here in Franklin County. Ladies and gentlemen, most importantly, I want to ask for your support again. So on May 20th, I humbly ask for your support to go back and represent you in the United States Congress. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you. Mr. Halverson, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Moderators, great job tonight. Thank you all for coming out to Wilson College and spending this hour of exciting something. Words escape me. You have a choice. The debates are over. We have 5 days. There's going to be a vote on May 20th, Tuesday, and it's going to be a very important vote. In the last 10 years, as I pointed out, you haven't had a choice. You have a choice this year. I think you have a good choice. We can stick with the status quo. We can stick with a record that I listed before. I'll just remind you of a couple of things. Support for the vehicle mileage tax. 10 times voting to fund. The operative term here is fund Obamacare. It's not an issue of supporting or not, it's an issue of funding. In Washington, policy is decided by what is funded, and Obamacare has been funded by our current representative 10 times. The debt ceiling has been raised 14 times. That's a fact. Can't get around it. We can talk about balancing the budget in 10 years, but that's really a ruse, because in 10 years, we will never get there. 10 more budgets will be passed before that happens. It's nonsense. Budgets don't get passed balanced in 10 years. We, in fact, have a loss of jobs and a loss of population in our district. That's because I believe our current Washington insider representative is supporting the Washington lobbyists and the lawyers and the special interests that are supporting him, and we have got to put somebody in Congress to represent us who will be in the district, who will be working with businesses to generate jobs and bring hope back to our district, so people don't have to leave high school and go out of the district to look for jobs because there are none here. The jobs are leaving. So I hope that you will, on Tuesday, vote for me, a veteran, somebody who is an authentic conservative, pro-life, citizen legislator, self-term limited, on Tuesday, May 20th. Thank you very much. God bless you and God bless America.
Thank you. Mr. Cooley, 2 minutes.
Well, I thank everyone for being here, and once again, I'm very humbled and privileged to be standing before you. I'm a veteran, I'm a Christian, I'm a father. My wife and I run a livestock business. My wife runs another sole proprietorship out of the house. I work full-time right now, and I'm running for Congress. There's not a lot of time for much else, I can assure you. In the last 2.5 days, we've been in 5 counties at different events. So it is very straining and very difficult for a working man to be able to engage at this level in a congressional race. I can implore you. I'm a working class man, like I said, and I think this election we have a rare opportunity to elect a man who knows what it's like to live an ordinary life. I've used the quote there before that, if the transmission were to go out in my truck, I'd have to wonder. Like so many people who have to worry about their life, not only their life, but their future of the country. And I understand what being a regular guy is about. And I think there's a disconnection in Washington, D.C., and people are all together from a different mold, and they don't have a connection with the people. They don't understand. It's why the policies aren't reflective of benefiting the people. I am under the opinion we've all created an aristocracy. The lower house, the House of Representatives, was meant to be a place where small business owners and middle-class people could go to D.C. and make sure that they were going to be working for working-class people. Super PACs and other corporate PAC interests have taken over this process. The message I have in this campaign is that we work together. We can show them who's boss. We can show them who's boss, and that will send, I think, the strongest message we have sent in a long time. And all the money in the world can't buy elections anymore. People will once again realize that we run the shop around here and that we matter. And we can all work together to help this country get back on the right track. I'm just a servant.
Thank you. On behalf of Wilson College, thank you all for participating, and thanks to the audience for coming, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wilson.